I'll talk a little bit about it. I think for me, I think that that year was very interesting. I always had our crew ready to go by the 1st of May, and so we were running on fires pretty early compared to some of the other crews in our region. And so we were hitting some fires, and some of the fire behavior that we were seeing, there were actually shelter deployments on other fires that just weren't noted. There was no documentation of them, but we were on those fires where there were shelter deployments from hotshots. I'm not going to mention those fires, and I'm not going to mention the crews that had deployed. There were individuals within a crew that had deployed. And so we were seeing this trend in May. Some of the fire behavior that we were seeing in the various regions, because we'd already been in Region 3 and Region 5, and a few fires in Region 6, we were starting to see this difference in the fire and how it was running and some of the things that were occurring. I think we had been on 2 specific fires where there had been some shelter deployments that were not reported. So by the time we get to Storm King, or to Colorado, I should say, I was on guard. And once I heard we were going to Colorado, because Gleason always taught us about the Missionary Ridge fire, where there were fatalities on that one, or the Loop fire, but we were going to Colorado, and I'll never forget saying to the crew, we need to be paying attention, because I remember the Missionary Ridge, what happens is the fire will burn underneath that scrub oak, and it'll preheat the brush. It won't completely blacken everything and nuke it out, and the fire will run through again. And so I was just making sure that we were all squared away. So I think that for me, once again, that my hard drive was loaded up enough that there was something that just kept nagging at me on the whole time in Colorado. Colorado, prior to that, I mean, they were not that region in Colorado. They didn't have fires every year, like Region 5 or Region 3 or even Region 6. So their fire interval system was in a longer stretch. But when they do have fires, they're very extreme. And so I think those were things that I just remembered from Paul teaching us, is that Colorado's fire intervals were not like the rest of the other country for a variety of reasons. Higher elevation, they may have more snowpack or whatever. But I just remembered all of those things. And I think by the time we got to Storm King, or to Colorado, there were just some red flags overall. And I won't go into too many details on that, because I'm not here to judge or criticize, but there were some differences in how Colorado managed fires compared to some of the other fire regions that are more typically deal with fire on a more regular basis. There were some differences in how things were managed overall, from the time we landed to the time we ended up on the fire that we were on, which was not South Canyon. But it was very different. They were not prepared to have us, and they weren't prepared to give us the tools that we need, because when we fly, we don't fly with our fusees and such, and so we need to rely on them to support us for fuel for our chainsaws, to fusees to carry in our packs, and so on. And they weren't prepared for that. But we weren't going to compromise, and we were just going to make sure that we were going to be safe where we were. But it was different. So when that hit, the other thing I will say is that it was so surreal when we had heard about that it was Prineville, and because we weren't getting any information at all. And I think that was another turning point on how they managed the whole critical incident stress debriefing. That was not managed well at all, and offering free alcohol to the crews was probably not the wisest thing. Once we all came back together after the fatality, it was probably not a wise thing, and there was no coordination or information given to us on what their plans were with us. But it was interesting. I would have to say that I think South Canyon was a huge turning point. It was the first time that many people from the elite, the hotshot crews and the smoke jumpers and the repellers had been burned over, and it was a huge turning point. So they came out and did study after study after that, and They did a lot of different studies on what attributed to it, and that's when the work rest guidelines started being developed, and some other types of things were being developed. But it was a huge turning point for. You have these things, these events that occur, and then you see a change in direction, so it's kind of like a compass bearing changes just a bit. And so in this case, the compass bearing changed maybe 10 or 15 degrees, and it changed pretty hard, so on how we suppress wildfire and such. And a lot of the other changes that you may see are just in a 1 degree segment, and so over time you may see the change, but initially you don't see them. But in that case, you have these major events that really change how we suppress wildfire, do what we've been doing for years, and some of it's good, but sometimes I think we need to sometimes bring that back a little bit and kind of find a better balance, because maybe those hard right turns are not always the right thing. But there were a lot of good things that did come out of South Canyon, but I think that we need to revisit some of those things. Were they a little too much, or can we come back? But I look at life as a compass, and are those major degree changes or just 1 degree increment where over time you'll see the change?